Chosen one, God has been counting something. For years now, He has been holding doors open for you that He would have closed for anyone else. He has been resetting moments that should not have been available for a second time, let alone a third or a fourth or a fifth. Because when He looked at you, He saw something that made Him unwilling to give up on what He placed inside you. And so He extended, and extended again, and again, 7 times. Not as a reward for your readiness, but as evidence of His love for what He knows you carry. 7 specific moments in your life when heaven bent the ordinary rules of time and consequence to give you one more opening, one more chance to step through the door into the life He designed for you before you were born. You felt each one. You know which ones I mean. You still think about some of them late at night when the noise of the world finally goes quiet and you are left alone with the truth of what you have not yet become. And today He is sending you one final message. Not a warning, not a punishment, a declaration. The 7th extension has arrived. And unlike the other 6, this one comes with a word He has never sent to you before. Last. This is the last. And what He placed inside you, what He has been trying to activate through 7 separate windows of grace, can no longer wait. The frequency of your destiny is calling, and this is the final time the signal will be sent. Before I take you through what those 7 moments were, and why the 7th carries something the others never had, stay with me all the way to the end of this message. By the time we are done today, you are going to understand why your life has unfolded exactly the way it has. You are going to see what was actually happening behind every moment that felt like loss or delay or failure. And you are going to learn about something specific God placed inside this 7th extension, something He did not send with any of the first 6, that changes everything about what is now available to you. Stay with me. Everything that matters is in what comes next. Now let me tell you about those 7 moments, not by number, not in the order they happened, because that is not how you experience them. You experience them as a pattern, a specific and recurring pattern that has been running through your life, like a thread you could feel but never quite hold long enough to follow all the way through. The pattern always started the same way. Something in your life that felt stable, something you had built or settled into, or grown comfortable relying on, suddenly shifted, not gradually, suddenly. A relationship that ended in a way that made no logical sense at the time. A job that disappeared. A plan that collapsed before it could become what you thought it was going to be. A season that felt like the ground moving under you without any warning at all. And in the silence those interruptions left behind, something appeared, not immediately. But within that silence, once the noise of the disruption began to settle, something else was waiting. A clarity. An unusual amount of space in which something inside you, something that had been drowned out by the fullness of your ordinary life, could finally speak and be heard. Most people around you called those moments hard times. And they were hard. But they were something else at the same time. They were conditions. Not random bad luck. Not evidence of something going wrong. Carefully arranged conditions. The only environment in which the real signal could break through to you, to the part of you that lives beneath the surface of your daily life, beneath the habits and the roles and the routines that fill the hours and make everything feel manageable. And the signal did get through. Every time. You felt it. Not with your ears, and not exactly with your conscious thoughts, but in that deeper place, the one in your chest that does not have a name, but that you have known your entire life, you felt a pull. An unmistakable pull towards something different, something greater, something that felt like the actual shape of your life, rather than the version of it you had been living, towards something you could not fully describe to anyone around you, but that you recognized with every cell in your body as real and as true. You may have called it a feeling, an intuition, a dream that stayed with you for longer than dreams usually do, a sense of purpose that flickered on and then off again, like something trying to connect. But what it actually was In every single one of those 7 moments was God making his voice heard through the only frequency that can reach the part of you he specifically designed. And you heard it. You felt it every single time. What happened next is what I need you to understand. And I want to be careful here, because this is not about judgment. It is about recognition, about seeing yourself clearly so that what I am going to say about the 7th door makes complete sense. What happened next was that you moved toward it. You always moved toward it. Every time. You stepped close, right up to the edge of the threshold. Close enough that the air on the other side reached you. Close enough that something in you, deep and quiet and certain, actually tasted what was possible. You felt the shape of the life that was waiting on the other side. You felt what it would be like to cross through, and then you stepped back. The retreat was always logical. That is what makes it so difficult to see clearly from inside it. Fear, real and specific, attached to something concrete in your life that you felt you could not afford to get wrong. Responsibility to people around you that felt more urgent than your own movement forward. The words of someone close to you who did not understand what you were feeling and whose doubt landed in you at exactly the wrong moment. And doubt, at the wrong moment, weighs more than it has any right to. Or simply the very common human experience of standing at the edge of a significant and irreversible change and not knowing what the first actual step looks like, and not knowing feeling, in that moment, like a perfectly reasonable signal to wait. So you waited, and the door stayed open a little while longer, quiet and patient, as if it already understood this particular pattern. And then it closed, not with force, gently, almost without announcement, and life moved forward. And another season came, and then the pull returned, and the cycle began again. 7 times this happened, 7 complete cycles of signal and opening and almost in retreat. And I want you to understand something about why that number is not arbitrary. Because in the way God speaks and the way he operates, 7 is never incidental. 7 is the number where completion lives. 7 days of creation, not 6 with an extra day, and not 8 for safety. 7 as a complete and self-contained unit that arrives at its own wholeness and then rests in that wholeness. 7 seals. 7 churches in Revelation. 7 times the Israelites circled the walls of Jericho before those walls came down. God does not use 7 carelessly. He uses it to mark the moment when a cycle has finished, when everything that needed to happen inside a particular movement has fully happened, when the thing is not almost whole, when it is whole. He has given you 7 complete rounds of grace, 7 full cycles of his voice, his signal, his open door, his patient waiting. And I want you to sit with what that actually means, because it is not a story of 7 failures. It is a story of extraordinary love, expressed through 7 full cycles of patience that most people on this earth will never receive. Most people who feel the signal once and step back from it do not receive a second. Some do. Some receive 2 or 3. The people God has something irreplaceable planned for. The ones whose purpose the world genuinely cannot afford to lose to hesitation. Those are the ones he extends 7 times. You received 7. That is not accident. That is not luck. That is the fingerprint of something God placed in you. He considers worth 7 full cycles of pursuit. But here is the thing about 7 in the language God uses. What comes after the completion of a 7 cycle is never simply more of the same. What comes after 7 is a new creation. The pattern arrives at its destination, and the destination of your 7 cycle story is not another version of the same cycle. The destination is the crossing, the final and permanent crossing into the life that has been waiting for you on the other side of all 7 doors. Which means you are not standing in the middle of a long journey of second chances. You are standing at the end of a completed cycle and at the very beginning of a new one. And both of those things are happening in the same breath, in the same moment, right now. But before I tell you what the 7th door holds that the other 6 did not, I need to name something with you. something your body already knows, even if your mind has not fully formed the words for it. There is a version of you that the very first extension was trying to unlock. The person who would have emerged if the signal from that first disruption, that first engineered silence, had been fully acted on. That version of you has been waiting, not gone, not cancelled, not taken away and given to someone else. Waiting and waiting, when it involves the kind of accumulated potential that God places inside a person He made for something specific, does not stay weightless over time. Potential that has nowhere to land does not float pleasantly in the background of your life. It does not simply pause and bide its time without leaving any mark. It turns into something heavier, into the unnamed restlessness that settles into you when everything around you looks functional and fine, but something inside you cannot quite settle with it. Into the question that surfaces sometimes when you are alone, the one you cannot fully form into a sentence, but that presses against the inside of your awareness. Into the low and persistent sense that the version of your life you are currently living is somehow a rough draft of the one that was actually supposed to happen. You have felt that. You may have given it different names depending on the season. Some people call it depression. Some call it anxiety. Some call it a feeling of being behind, of having missed something important without being able to identify exactly what it was. Some call it restlessness. But underneath all the different names, the sensation is always the same. It is the pressure of 6 full doors of potential that never had a place to land. And the accumulation of that pressure has not only been felt by you. The people around you feel it too, in ways they cannot always articulate. They sense that the version of you they interact with every day is not quite the finished version, that something essential is still being held back, that the fullness of who you are has not yet arrived into the room, and they may not know how to name that. They may not even fully understand what they are sensing, but it is what they are sensing. And then there are the people who have not yet appeared in your life, the ones whose paths were supposed to shift because of the ripple that travels out from a person who finally steps into the fullness of what they were made to be. The lives that were supposed to be touched by your work, your presence, the specific version of you that only fully exists when all 7 doors have been walked through. Some of those people, you know. Some of them are not yet part of your story. Some of them have not yet been born. And in their own way, without knowing it, they are all still waiting. I say none of this to produce guilt. Guilt is not useful here. The intention is wait. The intention is for you to feel clearly, perhaps for the first time, what it has actually cost you to carry 6 full cycles of unrealized potential in a body that was built for forward movement, because the body was not designed to store that much waiting. And the cost of the storage has been real, and it has been ongoing, and you have been paying it quietly for a long time. But here is what God is sending this message to say about that weight. Every ounce of what was stored in those 6 doors, all of it, every piece of accumulated grace and stored potential and waiting possibility, He transferred into this 7th extension, not lost, not punished into disappearance, transferred, moved forward, collected from every closed door, and deposited in its fullness into this final moment, into now, which means the 7th door is not simply one more chance, it is 7 chances compressed into the body of one. It is the most loaded, the most prepared, the most grace-saturated moment of opportunity you have ever stood inside of. And it holds something that was not placed in any of the first 6. Something God specifically prepared and deliberately held back until the cycle was complete. What God placed inside this 7th extension is what I need to tell you next. But what I need you to carry forward from everything I just said is this. The weight you have been carrying was not punishment, it was storage. And it was always intended to be released. Into this moment, into now, into the 7th and final door that is standing open in front of you right now. What comes next changes everything about what is possible. Chosen one, let me tell you something about this exact moment. Not this message as a general concept, this actual moment that you are inside of right now, as these words reach you. This is the seventh door, not a representation of it, not a symbol pointing toward it somewhere in your future. The seventh extension of grace that God counted and planned and prepared across years of your life. This is where it lands. The reason this message reached you today, the specific chain of events that brought this to your ears on this particular day, was not coincidental. God arranged it. Because this is the seventh, and He needed the seventh door to open in a form that you could actually step through. Not a feeling in your chest you might dismiss by morning. Not a dream you might rationalize away by afternoon. A clear and spoken message, in a form your conscious mind can hold and process and remember. And I want you to understand what makes this version of the invitation different from every other one you have received. The first 6 invitations came as signals, as impressions, as that unmistakable pull in your chest that you could feel clearly but could not always hold on to long enough to let it become action. They came softly, in the language of intuition and dream and unexplained feeling, because God was giving you room to come to them in your own way, in your own time. They were invitations, and an invitation carries a certain quality of openness. It says, come if you are ready. Come when you are able. Come at your own choosing. This is not an invitation. This is something different from all 6 of those. What God is sending today is a summons, not in the frightening sense of that word, but in the precise and specific sense of it. A summons is what is sent when someone who belongs to something significant is needed now, when the work they were made for has reached the moment of its readiness, and the readiness can no longer wait on them. A summons does not say, come when you feel ready. A summons says you are needed. The thing you were built for has arrived at its moment, and you are being called to show up for it. And here is what distinguishes a summons from an invitation in the way God operates. An invitation can be declined, and another one may eventually come. A summons that goes unanswered does not keep coming. The thing that issued it finds another way forward, or it does not, but it does not wait indefinitely. The window of the summons has a duration, and what was available inside that window does not remain available once the duration closes. This message is the summons. This moment is the window. And God did not send a summons without also sending everything necessary to answer it. That is the other thing that makes the 7th different from the first 6. The first 6 were invitations with open doors. The 7th is a summons with a key. Let me be honest with you about what happens if the 7th goes unanswered, not to frighten you, but because honesty in this moment is worth more to you than comfort, and because understanding what is actually at stake is part of what makes this decision real. When a 7 cycle completes and the final extension is not walked through, what changes is not dramatic on the surface. Nothing collapses overnight. Nothing falls apart in any visible way. Life continues. Tomorrow comes. The people around you see nothing obviously different. You wake up and move through the day, and the surface of your life looks the same as it did before. What changes is internal, and it is gradual, almost imperceptible at first, so gradual you would not notice it happening until it had already happened. The frequency of the signal begins to diminish, not because God withdraws from you as a person, but the specific channel that has been carrying His invitations toward your purpose, the one tuned to the exact frequency of what you were made for, begins to close, slowly. The way a door on a well-oiled hinge drifts shut when there is no one holding it open. No slam, no announcement, just a slow and quiet drift toward closed. And one day, not tomorrow, not even necessarily this year, but one day, you reach for that feeling, that specific aliveness that you have known in the 7 moments of extension, that pull in your chest that has been there since you were young, and that you have, somewhere, beneath everything else, always counted on still being there. And it is less clear than it used to be, and then a little less. until eventually it becomes something you remember having, a feeling you used to be able to access, and that now lives at a distance you cannot quite close, no matter how hard you reach. There is a version of your future that contains that drift, a version where nothing terrible happens, where you are safe and comfortable and stable, where the story of your life is a decent one that many people would be glad to have, but where the extraordinary part, the part that was written with your name on it before you were born, is present in the room only as a door you can see across the distance but can no longer seem to reach. That is what God does not want for you. That is why this message exists. Not to describe that door from the outside and leave you standing there, but to give you what you need to walk through it. And that is what he specifically prepared for the 7th extension that he did not include in any of the 6 that came before it. Here is something that almost never gets talked about in conversations about spiritual purpose and divine calling. Something that gets left out of the picture almost every time. And the absence of it is responsible for more uncrossed doors, more moments of almost, more retreats from the threshold than almost anything else. Most people who receive signs and feel the pull and get right to the edge of the threshold are not held back by a lack of faith. They are not held back by unwillingness. They are not being held back by a spiritual problem at all. They are being held back by a neurological one. The human brain, after years of reaching forward and retreating, after years of getting close and stepping back, after years of carrying the weight of potential that has never been released, develops patterns, not spiritual patterns, physical ones, actual pathways carved into the structure of the brain itself by repetition that route every signal of forward movement back to familiar territory, back to what is known, back to safe. Not because the person is broken, not because they lack something essential, but because that is what a brain does when it has learned over and over that reaching forward leads to the experience of retreating backward. It automates the retreat. It makes stepping back feel like the reasonable and correct response every single time before a conscious decision has even been formed. This is not weakness. This is not a character flaw. This is the brain doing exactly what brains do. And God, who designed you and who placed your purpose inside a brain he also designed, was not unaware of this when he was preparing the 7th extension. He did not build the final door without also building the key. He did not issue a summons without also providing what is necessary to answer it. What he prepared is not a more intense version of the spiritual practice you have already been doing. It is not a prayer formula or a ritual or anything that requires you to try harder at something you have already been trying at. What he prepared is a frequency, a specific, measurable, documentable sound frequency that has the ability to interrupt these automated retreat patterns in the brain and open the pathways that years of repetition have narrowed or closed. A frequency that reaches the part of the mind where your purpose has always been stored, waiting, and activates what has been sitting dormant there. This frequency has been given a name, the Genius Song, and that name is a direct reflection of what it does. Because the genius that has been waiting inside you, the version of your mind that operates from a different level of clarity and capability and forward movement than the one your daily conditioning has left you with. That is what this frequency is designed to unlock. Not to give you something you do not already have, to open what has always been there, but has not been able to get through the pattern that has been running your retreats. The people who have experienced it describe the same shift in different words, a clearing in the mind that arrived quietly, without fanfare, a release of something that had been held tight in a place they could not quite locate. And in the days that followed, a different quality to their thinking, decisions that used to feel impossible becoming clear, forward movement that previously felt like walking against a current beginning to feel possible, and then natural, and then easy, not because their circumstances changed first, because the part of the brain that had been rooting every attempt at forward movement back to safety finally received a signal strong enough to interrupt the pattern. And when the pattern interrupted, the crossing became available in a way it had not been in any of the previous attempts. This is what God placed inside the seventh extension, not more of what you already have. A key designed for exactly the lock that has been keeping you on the wrong side of the door. I have heard from people who stood at moments that sound very much like where you are right now, who had been close to their version of the crossing more times than they wanted to count, who knew what the pull felt like, who could recognize the edge of the door when they reached it, and who had retreated from it more times than they liked to admit to themselves. A woman who had felt the signal of her purpose returning for 4 years told me that within 3 days of experiencing this frequency, something in the way she related to her own forward movement changed. The internal negotiation stopped. The voice that ran through every reason to wait went quiet, and in that quiet, she moved. And the 3 months that followed were unlike any 3 months she had lived before. Not because everything became easy, but because the resistance that had been automatic simply was no longer running. A man who had spent years in a life that was functional, but that felt like someone else had written his story, described it this way. He said his brain seemed to suddenly have access to a different answer. The same brain that had been producing no for years woke up one morning with something else available. He said it was not dramatic, it was quiet, but it held. These are not exceptional people. They are people who arrived at their moment with the right key already in their hand, which is exactly where you are today. So here is what I am asking of you, just one thing, not a commitment yet, not a leap into anything, one single step. Below this message, in the pinned comment and in the description, there is a link to the Genius song. I am asking you to go there, to read what is there, to let the information reach you without deciding anything yet, just the step of going to look. Because here is what I have seen happen over and over again. The people who take that one step while the resonance of what they just heard is still alive in their body, while the recognition they felt during this message is still present and speaking, those are the people who cross. The ones who decide they will come back to it later, when they have more time, or more clarity, or a better moment, almost always find that by the time later arrives, the urgency has quietly faded. Not because the door closed in those hours, but because the pattern that has been routing them back to safety for years quietly reasserted itself while their attention was elsewhere. And what was available to them in this moment became one more almost. One more of the ones they still think about when the world gets quiet and they are alone with themselves. I do not want this to become another almost for you. That is not pressure. That is what I have watched happen too many times to leave unsaid. Right now, while the part of you that already knows this is true is still louder than the part that wants to wait, take the step. The link is below this message. 30 seconds to find it. And what you find there was prepared for this moment. For you. For the seventh door. God gave you 7. He did not extend his grace 7 full times, so you could hear this, feel it, and then let the feeling settle quietly back into the background of an ordinary day. He extended 7 times because he has seen what is waiting for you on the other side of this crossing. He has seen the version of your life that exists after the 7th door is walked through. He prepared it. He has kept it available through 6 closed doors and 7 complete cycles of patience because it has your name on it and only your name on it. All that remains is whether you decide today that 7 is enough, that you have been given enough, that you are, finally and fully and without any more reasons to wait, ready to step through. The door is open. The key is in your hand. Chosen one, it is time to walk through.